right, welcome to the Progressive Hub show hosted by Roots Action. Today we have Micah Herskind, who is an organizer and a writer in Atlanta, likes to be defined as an organizer who also writes, not to be confused. Micah, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. We had a little storm here in Los Angeles this weekend, but we're making through. I did see, we had a Mariah Parker on previously to discuss Cop City, Stop Cop City. Did a whole rundown of what had happened over the past few years. Killing Tortuguita, charging 40 plus people with domestic terrorism, potential RICO charges. But the Cop City petition vote had just started when we interviewed her. So I know that there's been some recent updates with the petition. Can you give us any good news or what's going on with that?
Yeah, people have put in so much work this summer to really get it done. And the campaign announced that they've collected over 100,000 signatures,
Wow.
which is just absolutely incredible. I think that people know that the city is going to pull out every trick in the playbook to try to, I don't know, disqualify signatures, throw things out. They've said in legal filings that even if the signatures are collected, that they won't be putting the issue on the ballot. So, we know it's going to be a fight from the city. But yeah, the effort has just been incredible. You can't go anywhere in Atlanta without seeing, a canvasser walking around collecting, signatures. So it's been a really incredible summer of just so much energy put towards, this, yet another possible route to stopping Cop City.
That's awesome. And I saw that you all had been saying that this is way more votes than people that voted for mayor in the last election. Something like, I don't know, 60,000 people total voted for mayor, and then now 100,000 people are signing this, which is pretty incredible. And how many petition signatures is needed to get on the ballot?
So the number seems to be 58,000. I think that there's a possibility there. It looks like there might even be, recent updates that are still developing where the city might be trying to raise the number. Of course, there's always a matter of shifting goalposts that you see in any campaign like this. But it's, I would say it's about 60,000 signatures that we're looking at, which is why, referendum organizers are working to get a cushion, let there be no doubt. And, there already is no doubt, of course, that Atlanta is against this thing. But yeah, it's around that number.
Yeah, I imagine, throwing out 50,000, just to get them under the number needed, that's going to be tough. And yeah, they're going to continue to pull out all the stops. And I saw recently that can you explain the lawsuit that the city brought against the petition? I saw it was happening, but we need more details.
Sure. So it was actually a lawsuit filed by the referendum campaign. So basically the rules, as written by the city, are that you have to collect, these thousands and thousands of signatures. It's supposed to be 15% of people who are registered to vote in 2021 in the last Atlanta municipal election. But the rules of the city that are really opaque basically say that in order, not just to sign the petition, but in order to collect signatures on the petition, you have to be a registered voter who is a resident of Atlanta. Which means that, for people who don't know, the Cop City site is on land that's owned by the city of Atlanta, but it's actually outside of Atlanta city limits. And so, what those rules mean are that the people who live closest to, where Cop City would be built, even though it's never going to be built, aren't even allowed to collect signatures around this matter that's related, to their own backyard and their own lives. And so basically, people, who live in this unincorporated part of the county sued and said this is a First Amendment violation. This is an unnecessary restriction on free speech. We should be able to collect signatures too. And clearly it was really solid legal footing because this federal judge sided with the referendum campaign and wrote a pretty delivered a pretty scathing injunction saying the city does not have much here. They are trying to disqualify people from collecting signatures if they don't live within city limits. And they basically said, no, you have to let anyone collect signatures. And they said, we're going to restart the clock. You're supposed to have 60 days to collect signatures. And this judge said, we're going to restart the clock. And you have, an additional 60 days from when that opinion was delivered to keep collecting signatures. And of course, the city responded, with again, basically saying, their initial filing and then their response to the injunction was, this is the whole referendum's invalid. Even if you get the signatures, we're not putting it on the ballot. It's just this, classic case of all of the things Democrats complain that Republicans do to them in like Georgia statewide elections. Now we have local Democrats doing to us.
Right. And kind of how the argument against voting in presidential elections to quote unquote stop fascism and stop, fascism from proliferating around this country. Meanwhile, this is happening in a blue state, in a blue city under a Biden presidency. And correct me if I'm wrong, Andre Dickens is actually on the, Biden reelection team or leadership council or whatever it is.
Yeah, they announced some position for him. I can't even remember what it is now. But yeah, it's a deeply blue city. And to really put it in perspective for people, it's not just like a Democratic city. It's like Georgia every 4 years or even more often, everyone is talking about Georgia as this battleground state. It's critical for the Democrats in their election. We have 2 Democratic senators gave Democrats control of the Senate. Like the way you hear people talk about Georgia is, this is like one of the last hopes for democracy, and we need to elect Democrats here. And then now that, the people of Atlanta who are in this deeply blue area have been fighting for years to stop an unpopular and expensive project. You've got the Democrats being like, nope, we're gonna use every tool in the toolbox to throw out this effort to stop you from using your voices at the ballot box, right? Like this is the most basic issue of direct democracy,
Right.
and it's the most sort of like tepid way of engaging. It's above board, it's civic engagement, it's all the things that people in power tell you to do because they don't want you to resort to more radical action. And then you see people doing that and they're still trying to stop it.
For sure. Yeah. And yeah, it's a good point that you bring up. One thing that's been so inspiring about the Stop Cop City movement is that there is, this inside outside game that it seems non-hierarchical. And one thing that is so important that I've noticed is that even the more liberal groups, liberal people, that there hasn't really been any calling out of a more radical action from more people in the center. And I think that's so important because, we see that in other places where, the libs will sell out anti-fascists, anarchists, people that are, actually willing to engage in more direct action. And so, not really seeing that in Atlanta is great to see. And I think liberals and Dems all around the, people on the outside can learn a whole bunch. Totally. And so even the liberal organizers on the outside, it seems like the support to stop Cop City is there. So even these more electoral groups, they are throwing down for at least this Cop City petition, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's really an amazing thing to see because, for one, having electoral groups in Georgia, again, after the presidential election 2020, after the Senate elections, what did you hear? You heard, oh, the reason Georgia went blue is because of this grassroots efforts from all of these voter protections and voter turnout organizations. And now a bunch of those same organizations are turning around and, they're on the movement side and they're saying, we're going to help, the movement against Cop City. And I think that, that in some ways points to just how unpopular Cop City is, because, of course you have people closer to the site who are against it. You have abolitionists like me and many others, and the anarchists and the communists, and all of the people fighting for justice in a lot of different forms who are fighting this thing. But then you have people canvassing in like relatively wealthy white neighborhoods in Northeast Atlanta who often have terrible politics, and you got these people signing the petition. Like the depth of the political education and the depth of the unpopularity of the project is so widespread, I think, that it's really encouraging to see. It really is a big tent movement, but it's one that's drawn pretty clear lines of like, we do support all forms of engagement and direct action and civic engagement. And we're going to, either going to have people showing up at City Hall and calling their council members. And you're also going to have people defending the forest and engaging in, land defense in the long tradition of protecting the land from,
Sure.
people who would destroy it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that definitely Stop Cop City, people on the ground, sabotage is becoming more popular. It seems like, I mean, at least in canceling these contracts with people set to do, work on the land. Can you explain a little bit about how, the contractors and just the relationship between activists and contractors?
Yeah, I mean, so basically, all the way back in September 2021, the Atlanta City Council, had heard all of this input from the public the whole summer about how nobody wanted Cop City. And then they listened to 17 hours of virtual public comment because it was still, at that point, public meetings were virtual. And yet they approved the project anyway. They said to this private entity, the Atlanta Police Foundation, you can build this thing. And I think that's a point where sometimes campaigns, end, you suffer, a big legislative defeat and people are burned out, whatever. But in this case, there was this whole other group that essentially moved into the forest and, started setting up encampments and, saying, we are going to defend this land. The Atlanta City Council can say that it's okay for Cop City to be built, but that doesn't mean it's going to be built. And so,
Right.
This is all sort of public record. You can see it, online in different, communiques that have been issued by, anonymous activists, but people have been, burning construction equipment. And when contractors show up to do work, they're driven away, and they've built barricades at the edge of the forest. And that went on for a long time. And of course, it led to, an escalated police response. But it's not just been in the forest. It's also been people showing up to the houses of, executives with these contracting companies. It's been, flyering in their neighborhoods, telling people in their congregations, hey, do you know that this person in your congregation, is supporting the destruction of this land and the expansion of violent policing? And so really, it's like to me, it's we're going to, win by any means necessary, engage on every front. And you see people doing that and putting their bodies on the line and saying, even if the city says you can build it, you still need contractors to build it. And at this point, several contractors have been driven off of the project. I think they're having a hard time finding more subcontractors. They're actually winning this war of attrition in a lot of ways.
For sure. That's definitely inspiring for people around the country, right? Like,
yeah, it's inspiring to me. I'm amazed by the effort.
It's amazing, on the ground in Los Angeles. Just like so much solidarity, because we know the state's response to, any type of direct action, but any direct action towards the police or any police programs, the backlash is going to be substantial. Just like, bringing domestic terrorism charges against 40 plus activists, people that were just, potentially at a rally or a concert. And then potential RICO charges. And so maybe we can get into the RICO charges, because that's a popular thing in Georgia right now. These charges being brought against former President Trump by a prosecutor named Fani Willis, and the internet was blowing up. Lib's going to make her a new progressive hero, the next Kamala Harris. And yet, like, what kind of reputation does she actually have with people in Atlanta, Georgia?
Yeah, I mean, where to even begin? For one, yes, the immediate sort of liberal praise for Fani Willis is just brutal because, this is someone who has been a prosecutor for a long time. Back in the early 2010s, she was prosecuting mostly Black women school teachers as part of a cheating scandal in the Atlanta public school system, where she literally used RICO charges, racketeering charges, to criminalize educators and try to put them in prison. And so,
Yeah.
this is someone who, will throw a RICO at anything that walks and breathes and talks. And of course, everyone's excited once it's someone that we don't like, and like whatever. I don't care about bad things happening to Trump, but the fact is, this is a prosecutor who has done so much damage in people's lives. Not just through her use of RICO charges. She's also one of several prosecutors who is working on some of these domestic terrorism cases. So trying to put, Atlanta activists and others in prison for up to 35 years for attending a music festival,
Yeah.
and, just these outrageous political prosecutions. She is, keeping people in a jail every day, the Fulton County jail that's suddenly in the news, where multiple people have died in the last week. We have, a long-standing crisis. That jail needs to be shut down. People need to be freed from it. It is just an absolute death trap. This is, let me not go on too long, but she committed on the campaign trail that she would never seek the death penalty, and within her first year, she filed a case seeking the death penalty. She pledged to get the jail population down to 1,000 people on the campaign trail. It's at between 3,000 and 3,500 right now, and has done nothing to bring it down, is only expanding it. And so she's leaning into this case, building a national profile, because who knows what her political ambitions are. But this is someone who is, actively tearing apart the fabric of Atlanta, through these prosecutions and criminalization.
It's just, must be wild to see because we know how corrupt the National Democratic Party is, DNC, everything that goes on there. But you can kind of see the inner workings of the party at a very local and state level with what's going on in Atlanta, right? With Andre Dickens, he's supposed to be a rising star in the Democratic Party, and then you got prosecutor Fani Willis, potentially being set up to be the next star, just like Mosley in Baltimore, and just like Kamala Harris. And so you can see how these things are working, right? And you can see
Right.
what the future looks like of who we will continue to have to battle against. I
Yeah.
want to go back to maybe a little discussion about the Atlanta way. I think that ties into what we were just discussing about how Atlanta is supposed to be this great blue city, and how this Atlanta way has been co-opted and captured by the elites.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you could discuss that a little bit.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, the Atlanta way is a term that a lot of people have researched and sort of fleshed out. People like Maurice Hobson, Akira Drake Rodriguez, Dan Immergluck, many others. That basically refers to this strategic partnership between Black political elites and white economic elites that, in my understanding, essentially keeps the city functioning in service of capital, in service of big moneyed interests. It ends up sort of, you have Black elected officials, and then this white economic powerhouse, and they work together for the upper class, they work together for the haves. And they especially sort of on the elected representation side, often use this illusion of, well, we are Black political elected leaders, and so we're representing Black people. But the backroom conversations that are happening with the white CEOs who live in Buckhead, which is the very rich, very white part of Atlanta. And that's who the city works for, and that shows up in a lot of different ways. That shows up in Cop City, which was something that sort of that really, like, the area of Buckhead demanded. It was something that the CEOs of these major companies demanded. It shows up in major development deals and major subsidies for developers, where they get a ton of public land for very cheap, or with these massive subsidies, and they get massive private payouts and just this transfer of public wealth to private hands. It happens in the undervaluation of commercial properties where, these developers build these huge properties and they hardly get taxed on it. So they're not, actually paying any money for these things. It shows up in everywhere because meanwhile, we have an absolute crisis of police violence. The Atlanta Police Department just killed again Deacon Johnny Holman. It shows up in an eviction and a gentrification and a housing crisis. It shows up in underfunded schools. Basically, all of the things that people actually need to be safe and to live stable, thriving lives are not provided. Meanwhile, sort of this Atlanta way puts this face of progress on it, and it's how these elected leaders claim to be progressive while actually leaving the people of Atlanta to suffer.
Yeah, it's must be similar in all big cities everywhere. Like that sounds just like Los Angeles. Who our elected leaders are there to represent, and what interests that they look out for. Like Karen Bass just increased the LAPD budget, raised their salaries by 15%, 20% for new recruits. And like she is tied in with billionaires like Jeffrey Katzenberg. And so it's the exact same thing happening, in these blue cities.
Right.
One thing I do want to ask is what will happen if the city doesn't put the petition on the ballot?
I think that for one, they're going to fight it in court. It's going to be a court battle. And of course, I can't say what's going to happen, but I think that the movement has shown again and again that when, you reject attempts by organizers to use official channels, organizers and activists and community members turn to unofficial channels to stop this. And so, there's always this bait and switch from the city of, well, you need to engage with us and, you need to, give us, use the right methods, use the right channels. And then you have, hours and hours and hours of public comment. You've got, people canvassing, signing petitions, organization statements, all of the things that are, very proper and above board, and they ignore it. And that's what happened the first summer. And people turned to radical, militant, direct action. And, of course, I don't know what's going to happen next, but I don't think that the city should be surprised, if they cut off yet another means of, official above board engagement, if people turn to less official channels, because, again, I think that Atlantans have shown they're going to stop this thing no matter what it takes. And so, the city can, decide which route it wants to go.
Yeah, I asked that because it just seems like there has been so much effort put in on the official channels and the electoral means and all of that. And just getting to a point of, wow, putting in all this effort, getting all of these signatures, doing this in front of the whole country, like everyone watching, and then still not putting it on the ballot. That seems like just disastrous to me. That doesn't seem like it just seems as though they want to set off like the people of Atlanta, by whatever they're going to do. It's like they're committed and that's how much power the cops and the police foundation have, right?
That's right.
Like they are committed. The police foundation has complete fucking control over the city, and also the police foundation's donors have complete control over the police foundation. And so they just have their hands around city's neck, and they're going to force this project by any means necessary on their part. They've killed Tortuguita. They've actually caused violence on that land so far. And so like all of these things just shows, how much power the capital class has, but how much power the police have. They're just committed to building this project. And
like you said, like they're the only side that has a body count. Like this movement gets talked about, as violent, and like whatever, who cares about the violent, nonviolent distinctions? I don't actually think it's violent to destroy, destructive machinery that would,
Destroying
destroy a
property is not
forest.
violence. No.
Right. But whatever, like they call it violent. And meanwhile, the only side that has killed somebody is their side. The only side that's physically harmed somebody is their side. And, they are showing, and I think what's important here is, the police foundation and these other powerful actors who are often behind the scenes are showing, they'll gladly sacrifice, Andre Dickens' political career, because I can't imagine this man is going to have a second term. Even the mainstream commentators are writing their articles being like, oh yeah, like looks like this issue is going to bleed over into the elections, and they don't care, because of course they don't. And you still have these elected officials, just completely doing the bidding of these corporations and the various formations and entities that they organize themselves into, like the Atlanta Police Foundation.
Yeah, and I imagine as these things continue to evolve and at the end of it, that the police will be extremely unpopular. Like their popularity will take a nosedive from what it was. And we're seeing that here in Los Angeles. The police just said that they're having difficulty recruiting and holding on to people because of anti-police rhetoric.
Good.
Good. Yeah. I mean, also like they bombed a fucking neighborhood and killed people, and they,
Right.
kill homeless
Right.
people all the time.
Right.
But the anti-police rhetoric, and I think there is something to that. This propaganda war that we're in. I think Atlanta has done an amazing job doing that, and someone involved in the propaganda war here in Los Angeles against the police. It's been great to watch and learn from, and so we definitely have a lot of solidarity around the country, and we're all watching what's going on in Atlanta. And so we're wishing you all the best. And before we go, is there anything that we should know about what's going on the ground, or how people can support the movement going forward?
Yeah, well, first I'll just say, it's always so incredible to see, I know there have been banner drops and, solidarity protests and, even seeing the fireworks on the 4th of July, the Stop Cop City fireworks that some people set off in LA.
Yeah.
It's just amazing to see the solidarity, and, Atlanta is in solidarity with you all as well. Yeah, I mean, there are still ways to, support the referendum campaign. You can go to copcityvote.com. There's always organizing happening outside of that too. And, there was organizing and direct action happening, long before the referendum campaign. So there's also a site, stopcopcitysolidarity.org, that has, a lot of information on, all the sort of the local branches of all of these different entities that are behind Cop City. I'm sure there will be more weeks of action where, there's a call to come to Atlanta. But really, yeah, I just know that Atlanta organizers are so grateful for the support and for the solidarity.
Absolutely, yeah. So people can check out stopcopcitysolidarity.org, ways to tap in there. As Micah mentioned, the copcityvote.com, there's still organizing going on with that. And where can people find you personally, Micah?
They can find me on Twitter, Micah and ATL, but you should really go to the Defend the ATL Forest account. That's the one to follow.
Okay, Defend the ATL Forest account, and as long as Twitter exists, people can find you there.
All right, that's true. Who knows? Actually, I think it's Defend ATL Forest. I don't want to lead people astray. Sorry.
We'll pull this up before we go off. Yes, Defend ATL Forest on Twitter.
Cool.
Okay, Micah, thank you so much, and solidarity, and best of luck with everything, and we're all watching.
Thank you.
Okay.
Solidarity.
Stop Cop City.
Stop Cop City.